Hey there, welcome to the channel. So today we're gonna do a recipe slash review because Sweet Loren's, who is a gluten-free company that is mostly known for their gluten-free cookies. They also have gluten-free like breakfast bars, kind of like the Belvita breakfast cookies. They have those as well. Well, now they have a new product out. They have gluten-free puff pastry. So I was excited to try it out, and it's not all over the place yet, so I'm glad I actually found one. They also have a thin crust pizza crust now that I've not seen yet in stores, so we may have to check that out in another video. But anyway, I thought we would make a recipe using this to see how well it works, to see what it does. So today we're gonna be making a chicken and spinach cheese braid. I have pulled the recipe from another site, so it's gonna be nice to see if it works with this. I'm Jamie with Savory Savor. I share gluten-free recipes, tips, tricks, and resources to make your gluten-free lifestyle easier. So please consider hitting subscribe, and let's see what we can do with this gluten-free puff pastry. So for the recipe, I actually pulled the recipe off of the website puffpastry.com, which is the Pepperidge Farms website with all of their puff pastry recipes. So I've pulled this recipe from there. We are gonna do it in segments. We're gonna go over the first part of the recipe. I'm not gonna do a whole lot of showing you guys how to make certain steps of the recipe, like the chopping and all that, because ultimately I wanna see if the puff pastry works. So everything that I skip over showing you guys as far as prep will be stuff that you are probably familiar with anyway, like chopping and dicing. So we're gonna skip some of that this video. So let's go over the first part of the recipe. So the first thing we need to do is start our filling. So for our filling, you're gonna need a little bit of oil of choice. The recipe says vegetable oil. I'm gonna saute in a little bit of olive oil. You're also gonna need 1 red bell pepper chopped. Use any color you like, whatever your preference is. You're gonna need a sesame medium onion. We want about half a cup of chopped onion. This is a large Vidalia, so I'm gonna use probably about half of what's there and chop that up. You need a 10-ounce bag of frozen spinach that has been thawed and drained. This happens to be a 12-ounce bag, but I am gonna use the other 2 ounces of it. You're gonna need 1 clove of garlic that's been minced up. You're also gonna need some salt and pepper for seasonings. I'm gonna prep all this. I'm gonna saute it in the olive oil for about 5 minutes or so until it's crisp tender, and then I'm gonna remove the skillet from the heat and I'm gonna cool it for 20 to 30 minutes. So while I'm doing that, let's talk about the puff pastry, the ingredients, where I found it, and all that information. All right, so my filling is here cooling. So let's go over the puff pastry itself before we even open it up. So the box is an 8.5 ounce size box. I'm assuming there's 1 puff pastry in it. And at Target, I actually paid $8.99 for the puff pastry, which is a lot to me. I did have $1.50 back using Ibotta. That's something I've used for years. I like that as a savings app for my phone. So I did save $1.50 on it, but retail price was $8.99, then I got $1.50 off. In comparison, the Pepperidge Farm puff pastry at the Target I was shopping at was $6.39 for a 17.5 ounce box, which has 2 puff pastries in it. So that's a very big difference in pricing and size between the two. So the box itself does have 1 recipe on it for cinnamon twists. The baking instructions are clearly written on the side, and tips for success, such as keeping the dough chilled until you're ready to use it, brushing it with water to help things like sugar and sesame seeds or things like that stick. And if you're filling your pastry with ingredients that tend to be wet, it may take a few minutes longer to bake. The ingredients: water, a gluten-free flour blend of rice, pea, and buckwheat, cornstarch, palm oil, plant fibers, and in parentheses it has potato, rice, pea, and psyllium, rapeseed oil, ethyl alcohol, xanthan gum, salt. The next ingredient is hydroxypropyl methyl cellulose, which is a thickener. I think I said that right. Natural flavor, enzymes, sorbic acid, which is a preservative, lactic acid, and citric acid. One other key thing to note is the box actually says it is made in a dedicated room that does not process gluten, wheat, dairy, peanuts, and tree nuts. So, those are the ingredients. A little bit of info on the box. So, let's go over the rest of the ingredients and open this package up and see how well it actually works. All right, so the recipe states to mix everything else in a large bowl. I'm not gonna do that. I've got a fry pan with deep sides, so I'm just gonna put everything in here. So for the next ingredients, you want to add 2 cups or so of diced or shredded chicken. This is leftover chicken from last night's dinner, so we're going to add that. For some freshness, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of chopped basil because that's what I have in my herb garden. It also says dill could be used. If it were me, guys, use whatever you have. If you have parsley, use that. If you don't have fresh herbs, grab some dried herbs and sprinkle those in. We're also going to add about a cup of shredded cheese. The original recipe says fontina. I'm going to use mozzarella and provolone because that's what I have in the house. Next, we need to add a little more moisture back to the mix as well as help keep everything together. That's going to be with 1/3 cup of mayo. Let's get everything mixed up between the spoon and spatula and see which one works better. All right, guys, everything's mixed up well, so let's put this off to the side. Let me wipe down my counter, and we are going to start working with this puff pastry and see how it does. So before we get this puff pastry rolled out and shaped, let's go over the final steps of the recipe. You want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. You need a large cookie sheet with a piece of parchment paper on it to help everything from sticking. You're going to want 1 egg that has been beaten with about a tablespoon of water. Of course, we're going to brush that on the puff pastry to help make it shiny and brown. We are rolling this out, so I have my silicone mat down to help me with that, along with a couple tablespoons of gluten-free flour on the board. I'm just using King Arthur measure for measure. That's what I have in the fridge right now. Use whatever kind of gluten-free flour that you think is best. Let's open up this puff pastry. One thing to note that I didn't go over earlier, it has a use-by date on it. This is dated 7/23/24. So I just got this 2 or 3 days ago. Actually, it might have been about 4 days ago. So there's about a month shelf life on it from the time I picked it up till the time it has a use-by date. I don't know how long it's been sitting in the store, but this is something that you're going to want to get and use relatively quickly. I did find this in the refrigerated section, not in the freezer section. All right, so it's wrapped in plastic and sealed, and then it looks like it's probably got a piece of parchment paper. So I'm going to unroll it. And then I think I'm going to put it rolled side down because we are going to roll it thinner, of course. The dough itself feels pretty good. Now I need to roll this out to a 10x15 rectangle. So right now we are at we're about 10 inches wide, but we're about 12 inches. So I need about 3 more inches in length on here. So let's see how this goes. I think I'm gonna turn it this way since I tend to roll that way. I like the way it's rolling. It's not tearing yet. And I can see that it's stretching out. A little bit more. Okay, so I am at the 10x15. Now it says to move it over to the baking sheet before we move forward with the recipe. So let's do that. Now it's on the baking sheet and it says to face it with the short side facing you. So that's what I've got. Next, we want to take our filling and you want to leave a 1-inch space at the top and at the bottom. And I'm just going to fill down the middle and I'm going to try to keep it relatively in the center because we're going to braid it over. All right, now I've got some left, but I'm not going to use it for this. I'm actually going to heat it up and maybe eat it on its own at some point. I'm just afraid that I'm not gonna be able to close this if I put any more in here. So I'm gonna leave this like it is. One thing the box actually says is if this starts getting too warm to deal with, you can put it back in the fridge for about 10 minutes for it to get cold again. So remember, if your puff pastry gets sticky or starts getting warm, pop it in the fridge for a few minutes to chill it back down. Now what we want to do is we want to cut slits in the puff pastry all the way down so we can braid it. So you want to do it in 1-inch increments, and then you want to stop about 1/2 inch before you get to the filling itself. So let's do that. Now, of course, we need to braid it. So you want to take the top part and you want to fold it down over the chicken. And now we're going to fold these all the way down over the mixture, alternating sides. I'm probably not going to be super good at this, so let's see what happens. All right, so I'm about halfway down. Not really a braid, but really, I want it to taste good. I'm not so worried about my presentation yet. It is trying to tear just a little bit, but it's not yet. So I'm not forcing it too much. There is a lot of filling in here, so they're actually not touching everywhere, but we're not gonna worry about that either. All right, now the original recipe for Pepperidge Farms says to bend this into a horseshoe shape. I'm not gonna do that. I think that's risky. I think it's gonna break if I do that. So I'm not gonna mess with that. I'm just gonna leave it as it is. All right, so let's get everything coated with the egg wash. This piece, I think I'm gonna go underneath a little bit just to help it stick. Same with this. Okay, everything's been egg washed and now we need to bake it off. So the original recipe says 375 for 35 minutes until it's puffy and golden brown. I'm thinking I probably need to go a little different on that. The recipe on the box itself for those cinnamon twists says to bake them at 425. So that's 50 degrees hotter than the other one. So I think I'm gonna bump it up a little bit. I'm gonna bump my oven up to 400 as opposed to the 375 and see what that does. I'll bump it back down if I need to. And in regards to the time, I'm gonna start checking it at about 20 minutes in to see what it looks like. That way there I can adjust the temperature down a little bit if I need to, and I can also gauge about how much longer it's gonna need to cook. Remember, this is gluten-free and it may not be an exact bake like regular puff pastry from Pepperidge Farms. So let's get this in the oven and see what we can do with it. So our chicken spinach cheese braid is done. I have baked it for 35 minutes. It's nice and golden. It's still sizzling on the bottom a little bit. And I have it on a wire rack underneath this pan. I'm gonna let it cool for about 10 minutes. Then we'll slice it up and give it a taste. I am gonna get a couple photos, so it's probably gonna end up about 15 minutes or so until we actually taste it. But let's let this cool off and give it a taste. So our chicken spinach and cheese braid is done. It's cooled off some. Look how golden that is. The inside looks really good. Sounds really nice. You can actually see some of the layering there. Now, remember, we did roll this out, so it did compress some of those layers. But overall, working with it was very easy. I didn't have any problems with it at all, actually. It was more of a filling too much stuff into my braid than anything. So let's see what it tastes like. Nice and crispy. It did take the 35 minutes. All right, here we go. That's really good. Like, I like this. I like how crispy the puff pastry has come out. Let's see if I can pick it up and look at the bottom. The bottom's gotten crispy and brown. Taste is good. I don't really think it tastes gluten-free, but there's so much filling in there, it's kind of hard to tell. Let's try just a little piece of the crust. I really like that. I think that's gonna be great for recipes. I do think it's a little expensive, so hopefully it's something that the stores will run on sale once in a while, but I didn't have to make it myself, although I do wanna make puff pastry on this channel, so I'll have to think about that. But good product from Sweet Loren's, gluten-free puff pastry, relatively new on the market. I will link down below to the Sweet Loren website, so you guys can try to find this near you if you're looking for it. Again, I found it at Target, but I don't think a lot of the stores are carrying it just yet. I will also put the ingredients to the recipe because I really liked the filling itself. So I will put that in the description below, as well as a link to the original recipe, even though it's on a Pepperidge Farm site. Guys, I want to thank you so much for watching. Please leave me your comments below, and I hope to see you in the next video.